Cool. So my name's Justin Chalfant. I am the founder here at Patch My PC. A little background on us before we jump into the demo if you don't know what we do. We do third-party app management for Config Manager. So we can help you create your third-party apps as well as keep them up to date. So in today's session, basically we're just going to look through what it looks like to set up our product and exactly how it integrates into Config Manager. So that said, I'll go ahead and get started. Throughout the demo, though, feel free, if you guys have any questions on the phone, just jump in. Usually these are pretty interactive. We get a ton of questions throughout the session. So with regards to our lab environment, just a quick overview at what we have today. We can see that we don't have any third-party updates published, as well as third-party applications. So we're basically going to be starting from a clean environment with nothing configured and going through and showing you how simple it can be to set up within about 30 minutes or so. So first thing that we would do is we download our publishing service. So this is available for download on our website. Let's see. Why is that not? Okay, there we go. So we can grab this from our download trial page. So it's just a small MSI. This would get installed on your top level software update point within your ConfigMan site. So within this environment, we've just got our site server and SUP on the same site system. If you had a remote software update point, you would simply install this MSI on that remote system. Now, on that same download page for the MSI, if you wanted to get a full access 30-day trial, there's a form where you can just submit that and you would get your own unique URL that you could use to start using the product. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that MSI here. It's only a couple megabytes, so super lightweight. Let's go through kind of the standard here. Next there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch our tool. Now, the only prerequisite that we really have would be the code signing certificate. So if you've ever used third-party updates within WCS and ConfigMan, you know that there's a certificate that is used for signing the updates. This is what's going to ensure that your clients will trust the certificate that's used to sign the third-party updates. So one of the improvements in ConfigMan 1806 is the ability that you can let SCCM automatically generate your WCS signing cert used for third-party updates by simply going into your software update point, clicking this new third-party updates tab, and choosing Config Manager manages the cert. So by applying that setting, the only thing that we really have to do to get that running is synchronizing our software update point. So the next time that you sync your SUP after you enable that setting, what's going to happen if you look at the WSync Manager log within ConfigMan is you're going to see that it's going to create a new signing certificate for WCS here in a second. So this eliminates kind of the external need that you would have previously had to do to generate your own cert or import one. And probably the biggest thing that's going to help you eliminate is configuring GPOs to deploy this cert to your client so it's trusted. So as a ConfigMan admin, you may not always have access to GPOs, for instance. So now that we can do the certificate natively through SCCM, it eliminates that step. Sure.
On that, so 1806 is where that SUP certificate comes in?
Exactly. Yep. So this option is...
And that's all of that is native to SCCM. That's not Patch My PC. That's just SCCM, right?
Yeah, so the ability to essentially what we're eliminating here is the manual step that you would have had to do to generate your signing cert used for third-party updates. So by enabling this checkbox over here on your SUP, you essentially let SCCM take care of that prerequisite where you no longer have to manage a code signing cert. You can just let SCCM generate that for you. And the other nice thing that's available directly in SCCM now, this setting here has been available since 1802, is you can also enable a client setting that will tell your clients that they are allowed to install third-party updates, and this will also have them auto-install the cert that was just created on your software update point. So what previously would have had to been done through a GPO, you can now natively handle through Config Manager. All right, so that's really the only prereq. So we basically let SCCM create that, and we just reopened our tool. And now we're good to go with regards to prereqs. So next thing we're going to jump into are our updates and our applications. So within our tool, we've got two different tabs here. So we've got our software updates and our applications. So software updates are going to work through the native software update feature of ConfigMan. So we're going to start publishing these third-party updates and they could be deployed just like any other Microsoft update within SCCM. So that can be used to patch existing machines that have an older version of an application already out there. So you're going to see all the compliance data for that. Now, the app piece is something relatively new, where in addition to only doing patching, we can now do third-party applications within SCCM as well. So this will essentially create these products as an application that you can use for initial deployments through your task sequences or collection deployments, for instance. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the Updates tab. Now, we do have quite a large list of third-party products. So on our supported products page, you can kind of see a full list of what we have today. So quite a few things going on here. Now, what's also interesting is if we don't have a product that you have today, we do have a user voice as well. So within these user voices, for example, we have this category for app requests. So if there's something that we don't support today, you can come in here and submit a request, or you can upvote an existing request, for example. And this is how we track new apps that we add based on customer feedback. But for the demonstration here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and scan our SCCM database. So what that will do is it will query your config manager database. It's going to be looking at hardware inventory for installed applications. And what that's going to do is aggregate based on all the products we support, which is it's around 300 and some odd apps. Which one of those are already installed within your environment? So for example, you can see installed count, you can see vendor, and you can see product here. If you wanted to just enable everything that we've already detected that we support, you could simply do that within a couple seconds by just clicking that scan feature. But for this demonstration, we won't have time to go through all of that. Now, the other thing that's quite helpful as well is you can have this scan happen at each synchronization. And if there's any new products, for instance, that we've added in our catalog, you could have it automatically enabled based on that product being detected on a specific number of machines, for example. So you could set your threshold for when new products that we detect are now in your environment get detected, we can have that. And that can also apply for those new products that we add within our catalog going forward. So you never have to really come back into our tool for enabling new products based on them already existing in your site. And then lastly here, you can also export this to CSV. So you can just understand, like if you're trying to provide a value prop for management, you can show exactly how many products you could benefit from patching based on this scan data. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and for this demo, we're going to do a couple of different products. But before I actually start enabling products, I do want to show some of the customizations that we can apply at the global level. So by clicking on all products, we can recursively apply these configurations to all child products that we enable. So for example, the first one I'm going to enable here is automatically closing the process prior to installation. So for example, if you didn't want the app to be in use, you could choose to close it. The second one here is if you didn't want to be that aggressive and you knew there was a problematic app that couldn't update when it's in use, you could also choose just to skip it. Now these days, majority of products can update just fine while it's in use. You may just get a pending restart, similar to the way that cumulative updates work from Microsoft, for example. We can also delete public desktop shortcuts. So products like Chrome that put that public desktop icon using their MSI, we can remove that after the update's applied. We can also disable self-updates. This one's quite helpful where if you don't want products to go out to the internet just whenever, you can turn off the self-update feature. And then the last thing is logging. So let me just go ahead and copy a UNC path and show you what the logging looks like. So for logging, what's going to happen is if we enable this, so we're going to enable logging. For an MSI, we're also going to choose the checkbox to make it verbose. We're going to prefix the log with the computer name so it can be unique. And then the last option here is what we can do is if the installation fails, meaning that it's a non-zero exit code for either an update or app install, we can optionally copy those failed logs to a secondary location. So for example, the primary here, this is going to put it in a CCM logs and then create a subfolder called patch my PC install logs. But then what we can do is if we detect that an update or app fails, we can only copy those to a UNC path, for instance, because you probably don't care about every single log file collecting in a central path. You would probably only care about the ones that are failing. So rather than getting a generic 1603 exit code, you could actually understand why it failed based on the vendor's log. Okay, so jumping into the products, we're only going to do Chrome and Java for software updates today, just for time's sake. But once we get into the product level, we have 3 additional options that we can apply within that right click. So we can add custom pre and post update scripts that would always apply to this update. We can also modify the command line. So if you had a custom command line you wanted to apply for that product, you could do that. And then if it's an MSI-based product, you can also add a transform directly within the right click options here. So for Google Chrome, what we're going to do a post update script that's just running a PowerShell script that can be used to set the Google Chrome homepage to patchmypc.com. So essentially, this script is just setting some reg values that turn off the self-update, or I'm sorry, that set the homepage. So we'll just browse out and select that product, and that's going to run as a post-update script. That will apply for any future version of Chrome that gets published as well. So all these right-click customizations will apply for anything in the future as well, meeting that product for Google Chrome X64, for example. So you don't have to come back in here each time there's an update. We'll retain any of these right-click options that you've applied. Okay. And then lastly, we're going to do Java 8 32-bit. So we can see that we have those 2 options we applied globally. And this one's a little bit special where since JRE does not remove older versions by default, what we do is we opt into this patch my PC defined script is what we call it. And what this will do is auto remove any previous versions of Java runtime prior to installing the latest. This is optional, meaning that you could disable this. Now, this is the only product just based on them not removing older versions where we have our own script predefined for you. All right, cool. So that's what we're going to do for software updates. Next thing, if we jump over to the apps tab, before we actually start enabling some apps, I'll show you some of the basic options that we had pre-configured. So we configured our SMS provider. So that's going to be how we can create apps. We know where to talk. We've configured our UNC path that we're going to use as a root path for any app content that we download. And then there's a few various options that just apply to the app itself. So for example, this would be the checkbox that says, do you want the app to be allowed to install in a task sequence? And then just a few various other ones around boundaries, for example. Now, kind of the biggest one with regards to applications is this drop-down menu. So what this does, this is going to choose how you want the application to behave when there's a new update available. So by default, we update the app in place. So for example, if our tool initially created an app for Chrome 75 and let's say 76 came out, we would update that same app in place, meaning we would download the new content, we would associate the new content location within the deployment type, and then we would update the distribution points and detection method so that if you were using an app in a task sequence, you would always essentially be deploying the latest version of that product. You wouldn't have to go reassociate it. Now, if you did want more version control, we do have an option here where you can create a new app anytime there's an update. So if you want to retain all the previous versions or you don't want apps to auto update in place, maybe you have a stricter change control, you can just create a new app each time and then you can go through your testing cycles that way. Okay, and then lastly, we can distribute our applications that we generate to a distribution point group. And another pretty cool feature is, for example, within our console, if we look at the apps, there we go. We can see that we've already got some subfolders created over here within the applications node, right? So if you wanted all the apps from Patch My PC to automatically move to a subfolder, we can select the folder that you want to automatically move anything that we've created from our tool. So we're just going to do Patch My PC as the root level that all apps will go into. Now, one other helpful thing is we have this duplicate option. So if I click this icon over here with the copy, what this will do is it will automatically enable any products that you previously enabled for software update publishing, but it will enable those products for application creation. We can also copy any of the right-click options that were enabled for the updates for apps as well. So if we look here, we can see Chrome was auto-enabled, and we also have all the same customizations like our post-update script, turning off shortcuts, updates, and turning on logging. Now within the application node, there's a few additional settings that are specific to SCCM applications that we did not see in the update. So for example, let's say that we want to enable 7-zip. This is one that we did not enable as a software update, but we'll enable this as an application. Within here, some of those other options are we can set the max runtime. So for example, if you want to set that on your deployment type, you can simply do that using a right click. We can add the app's executable name in the deployment type's install behavior. So this is where you can essentially notify the user if a process is in use and be a little bit more interactive with that. And one of the new features that we implemented based on user voice is the ability to move applications at the product level. So for example, if you wanted 7-zip apps to go into the separate folder, not the global Patch My PC one, you can define that at the individual product. And then lastly, you can adjust some of the properties of the app itself. So by default, we're going to use all the info from the vendor for things like the app name, the localized app name and software center and description, as well as the vendor's icon. But if you wanted to customize any of that because you have some changes that you want to make within your environment, you can do that. So one example of why we made the app name configurable is for people that were using UI++ or things like MDT UDI within task sequences. And the way that they installed apps were tied to the exact app name. So if you didn't want that to change, which is something we generally do where we update it in place with the version number, you could have the app always stay the same, for example. Cool. So any questions on what we've kind of looked at so far?
We are happily eating the lunch that you've provided and very attentively paying attention.
All right. Awesome. Good to hear. Okay.
Do you have any questions, though?
I do have one quick question. When you do the automatically update package, can you schedule a time for that to happen, or is it just going to happen when you detect that there's a new version of that app?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially the next tab that we're looking at is going to be our sync schedule. So that's going to be how often our service...
the question. Hey, I've never seen this before.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, so the sync schedule, that's going to be when we check the catalog for new updates. So for example, the default behavior is going to be every night at 7 p.m. We're going to go out and check whether there are any new updates for any of the updates or application products that you enabled. This is, of course, configurable. So for example, if you wanted to make it on the second Tuesday, or you can even do offsets at Patch Tuesday, it's totally up to you for how often you want to sync to check for any new updates from our catalog side. Now, from our perspective, we look at our RSS feed, you can see that we release updates quite frequently. So on average, there's probably about 3 to 4 catalog updates per week. Now, within this RSS feed or email newsletter that you can optionally subscribe to, we'll include all the new products that were updated within a catalog update for a day. So for example, we can see on the 10th, we had some updates. It looks like primarily it was some Adobe Reader and Acrobat updates. Within our release notes, we will give any CVIDs. We'll link you out to the vendor release notes from this RSS feed. And we also scan every binary through VirusTotal, and we post those results within every release as well. Okay. And then kind of the last thing here in the sync schedule is you do have the ability, if we detect that there's been a new third-party update that was published, you can choose to trigger a software update point sync within your software update point so that you can have those updates showing up in your console right away and you don't have to wait for your next scheduled sync. So another helpful option here. Let me just see, did I actually trigger a sync? I may, oh, nope, I don't think I did. So usually when I jump over here to the sync schedule, I'll trigger that just to get some things happening in the background. So what that's going to do is if we manually trigger it, it's basically going to simulate the sync that would have happened tonight at 7 p.m. So this is where we can see things like it downloading the content for like Google Chrome and Java and 7-zip within this log file. Now, while we're waiting for that to start to publish, there's a few ways that you can get notified about any new updates that have actually taken place within your environment. So under the Alerts tab, we have essentially 2 options here. You can enable SMTP emails. So you would just configure your SMTP connection. In my case, I'm just using Office 365. And then lastly, a new feature that we added here quite recently is Microsoft Teams notifications. So you could add a Teams webhook that will automatically post these updates and apps that get created within your environment and notify you via Teams message within a channel. So probably within the next minute or two, we should start seeing some notifications come in. And then while we're waiting for this sync to take place, the only other thing that I'll show you here is that if you want to see our roadmap of kind of things that we're working on, you can also go to patchmypc.com/roadmap, and that's going to give you details about any new products that we've added within the last few months, as well as features. So essentially all the products that we're getting in the feature request on the ideas portal, that's going to be what ties into our roadmap where you can see what we have going on. So for example, in December, kind of our main thing here is going to be Intune support. So that's a big feature. So that's probably the only thing that we're going to be working on for December, as well as probably a good part of Q1 of 2020. So we're currently looking into that type of support. But if you ever want to see kind of how we've been implementing features based on customer feedback, you can check out that roadmap. Now, I did notice while we were waiting for that, we did get some Teams alerts. So if I go ahead and open up my Teams channel here, we can see that we just had Google Chrome published just now. We can see if we click on the release notes page within that Teams alert, that will take you directly out to the vendor release notes for that specific product that's been published within this synchronization. We also will give you the classification and severity level of the update. So we can see this Chrome update was security with a critical severity. And we can also see it had a lot of different CVEs that are directly clickable to the National Vulnerability Database. We can also see Java just published as an update. Same thing here. We can go out to the release notes for that product. We can see all the different CVIDs associated with that update as well, and click those as well. We also got another notification. So we had our first app created for 7-Zip. We just had our Chrome application created, and then our Java application created. All the same metadata fields would be available for apps as well within these Teams alerts. Now, with regards to the email alerts, let me just jump over to our Office account here. The email alerts will all come in a single alert once the sync is done. So you're going to get an email here, same concept. You're going to get the updates that were published as well as the applications that were created. We can also click out, go to vendor release notes. We can click out the CVEs, for example. The only difference there is it's an email rather than a Teams webhook, for example. And that's pretty much it as far as the initial configuration within our publishing tool. So our idea is once you get the products that you want, once you get your alert set up, you really don't come back into our publishing tool. Everything's going to be automated based on your sync schedule that you configure within your environment. What you're going to be doing day to day is just kind of monitoring either the Teams alerts or the emails to just kind of know when new third-party updates or apps get created. So all your work is going to be just the same day-to-day stuff that you would do within your ConfigMan console. So for example, we can see we already got some updates showing up because we had that option to trigger our software update point sync. And if we go ahead and jump over to our apps, we can see we have Google Chrome and Java showing up in the Patch My PC folder, and then we have 7-Zip within that subfolder. If we go ahead and look at the properties of this app, we are going to fill in all the metadata for you. So things like the Software Center details, like the app name, documentation, privacy, description, keywords, and the icon. So that would all be pre-configured for you where you don't have to worry about manually packaging these. And of course, you could use these using native app deployment, whether that's to collections or you could add these to your task sequences to help eliminate all that manual packaging time, as well as make sure that your base applications stay up to date within your environment. Okay, so jumping back to the apps or the updates, we can see we've already got some scan data starting to show up here. Now, depending on how you deploy your updates each month, whether that's through searches or ADRs, if you wanted to create a search, you could basically just show all updates from Patch My PC as a vendor. So that's going to include all the third-party updates that you've enabled and published from our product. And you could either create your update groups manually this way, if you do that, kind of like a manual process each month, or of course you could use ADRs. So same type of process would apply for ADRs here. So we can see we have this ADR for Patch My PC updates. We've got the criteria, quite simple. We're just saying non-superseded updates that are critical security or an update classification where the vendors Patch My PC. So if we were to preview this, we're going to see that Chrome and Java update showing up here. And then, of course, you have the same deployment. So within this ADR, we've got 3 separate deployments. We've got 2 pilots and then a production. So you're going to be using all the existing options that you would have available today. So you'd be using your collections. You could choose whether you want your deadline and available time to be different. And then, of course, things like Software Center. So do you want to make these updates visible or completely hidden? Do you want to abide by maintenance windows and restart? So all the same configurations for deployment would be the exact same process that you'd be accustomed to within the ConfigMan console. So that ADR actually kicked off after our software update point sync was triggered. So we can see it's already downloaded those 2 updates into a deployment package, and it's already created our software update group along with those 3 deployments. So that all happened in the background after that sync occurred. So we've essentially got these ready to deploy and install on our client side. Now let me just go ahead and deploy our application. So we're just going to run a PowerShell script here. All this is doing is deploying the 3 apps that we created to the all users collection as available. Just so when we switch over here to our client side, we can see what these look like within Software Center. Okay, so jumping over to the client, any questions before we start showing you what the update install and application install looks like on the client that we've kind of talked about so far?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, great demo so far. Keep going.
Okay, awesome. So on the client side, we can see that we have Chrome 75, Java 8 update 161, and we do not currently have 7-zip, as you can see. So since we have outdated versions of Chrome and Java, we can see that if we look at the Updates tab of Software Center, and this is only showing up because I made my deployment so that it could be interactive in Software Center. We can see the deadline for this pilot collection would be tomorrow. So we can see we have Chrome and Java.
You're on a different screen.
We can't see what you're showing.
We see your main desktop, not your Software Center.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
I'm not seeing it either.
Oh, sorry. Let me swap that out really quick. There we go. All right. Has that?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So only thing you missed was basically just showing these outdated apps, so Java and Chrome, and then Software Center. So we've got both of these showing up in Software Center because we made that available. So for Google Chrome, just a quick look at what we have going on today. If I go ahead and launch Chrome, we can see there's nothing special with the homepage. It's just google.com, just their search engine. We can also see the shortcut is on the public desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Install. And what we should see going on here in a second is since we enabled the vendor logging, we can see we auto created that Patch My PC folder in CCM logs, right? And we now have the verbose logging of Chrome's MSI within that CCM logs folder. Now, in the event this update failed, it got a bad exit code, that's where it would copy this same log file into that UNC path that we defined as a right-click option. Now, in addition to the vendor's log, if you enabled any customization for the software updates, we will have this Patch My PC script runner log within the root of CCM logs. This also uses a CM trace format. And what this does, this shows you all the installations that are going on, either updates or applications from our perspective. So for example, we can see that the Chrome update started. We can also see the logging parameter that we automatically added, as well as suppressing the restart. We can see that the update completed with exit code 0. We then deleted the public desktop shortcut based on that right-click option. And then we configured 3 different reg values related to turning off the self-update feature of Chrome. And then lastly, we ran the post-action PowerShell script that I added that sets the home page. So we can now see if we minimize this, that Chrome shortcut is gone. So if we go ahead and launch Chrome from our desktop, we can see the home page is set to patchmypc.com. That's going to be that post script that we configured. And we can also see if we click About, the self-update feature is now completely turned off, even from the UI of Chrome, based on that right-click option. Okay, and then kind of the last one that we'll look at here is Java. So if we look at the Java update policy in the registry, we can see that enable updates is set to 1. So that's just the standard value if you did not turn it off directly within your initial app deployment. We can also see the update tab is visible, and we're even getting prompted here in the taskbar that there's an update available. So I'm going to go ahead and start that install off. There we go. Now for Java, we're going to see the control panel app auto close, and we're also going to see the notification, the taskbar auto close. That's based on us enabling the right click option to kill the application prior to the update. So if you enable that option, you could see all that taking place. Within the script runner log, we're also going to see those processes that got closed before the update. We can then see as a pre-action, we ran the script that's going to remove the old JREs, and now we're currently running the main Java EXE installer. So if we go back to our vendor logs, we can also see the Java EXE log that's showing up on this client as well. So here in a second, we should see that we get an exit code of 0 from the vendor log. And then if we jump back to our patch my PC log after that, we can see that it just completed. So we can see that the Java completed with exit code 0. And then we set 4 different reg values to turn off the self-update feature of Java. So if I come back into the registry and refresh this key, we can see we set enable Java updates to 0. And we also configured 3 additional values to turn off all notifications for updates on the client side, for example. Okay, so that all looks good. If we come back into that Java control panel applet now, we can see the update tab is also completely removed based on us turning that off. So that's the updates. So it goes through the same software update feature of SCCM. All the update logs that are available on your client as well for software updates are also going to show our third-party updates as well. So for example, if you look to the WUA handler, you could also see all the same updates applying for third-party updates as well. So jumping over to the applications now, we can see that we have those 3 apps showing up as well. So in our case, we do not have 7-zip installed, but you can see we get a nice Software Center experience with icons, descriptions, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. This is also going to use all the native SCCM components. So for example, you're going to see the app discovery show up here to start the evaluation. And then we're going to see the app enforce that starts to initiate the installation. So we'll see all that take place within the same native logs as well. Now, in addition to the native logs for apps install, within the script runner log, the same log that we were looking at the software updates for, you're also going to see any applications that we install taking place as well. So you can see that we ran the 7-zip installer with the /s command line. So we can now see that's installed. If we come back to our control panel, we can now see we have 7-zip, we have Chrome up to date, and Java up to date as well. Okay, so that all looks good. So let me just jump back to the server for a second. Any questions before we look at some of the reporting options?
Questions? We're doing great.
Okay, awesome. So if I go ahead and refresh the updates, we may start to have some status showing back. So we can now see that both of those updates are showing as compliant on that machine that we just patched. So you're going to have all the same compliance reporting available from your console within the all software updates or your software update groups, as well as any of the reporting that's available within ConfigMan. So for example, any of the native reports around software update compliance will work perfectly fine for third-party updates because it uses the same exact mechanism for reporting compliance as Microsoft updates do. Now, in addition to the Microsoft updates, we do also provide some reporting dashboards that you can install within the Advanced tab. So if you come into the Advanced tab of the service, you can install these reporting dashboards just from our UI, and it will automatically upload and change the URLs for you. Now, these reports are actually free regardless of whether or not you're a customer. So most of these were based off of Gary Simmons' blog post about how to create SCCM dashboards. So essentially what we did, we supported some newer operating systems that were not available, and we also created the installer that's going to make it change all the URLs for you, and you don't have to go manually do all of this. So these are free regardless of whether you're a customer. You can go install the publishing service, and you can just run that installation from the Advanced tab, even if you're not using our product. So This is quite helpful with regards to like a UI. So most of the built-in ConfigMan reports don't really have like a chart or graphics. It's all kind of tables. So if you wanted to get like a better UI, you can upload our reports. This one will show Microsoft and third-party patches. So we can see for December, we have like 217 instances of updates that are either installed or required, or compliant or required. And if we click into that month, it's going to break you into updates that were released in the month of December. And it's going to sort on the ones missing on the most number of clients first. So for example, we can see we have this Chrome update missing. That was a security update. And if you click on that, depending on how deep you go, some of these will take you into some of the native reports within SCCM as well. So for example, if you wanted to drill in and see a specific update and what machines are missing, that's going to take you into a sub-report that shows you some of the native config manager reports, for example. Okay. And then there's just a lot of other charts and graphs just for overall compliance. These are all interactive where you can get different details if you want to drill in, for example. So that's the one that shows Microsoft and third-party updates. We also have one for only third-party. We have some where you can filter by update groups, for example, and collections, and get pretty specific there. But in addition to our SSRS reports that you can upload, what's nice about that is any other reporting dashboards that you may be using will also report third-party update compliance. So this is the free Power BI dashboard available from Microsoft. So for example, if we look at the update compliance tab here, we can see that in addition to all these Microsoft patches that we're missing, you will also see all the third-party updates, right? So within this lab, we've got a lot of different third-party updates here, and we can see all that through Power BI. We could also do filters, like if you wanted to only see critical severity levels, you could filter down, and now we can see that we're missing some Firefox and Java updates that have the critical classification within there. All the other same charts, you could say, what's my Windows 10 compliance? You'll see all the third-party updates missing on Windows 10 or Windows Server. So any of these reports that you may be using today, whether it's Microsoft dashboards from Power BI or even some of the free ones from the community, like scconfigmanager.com, I know has some pretty good ones. The key thing there is that we're going to be showing you all the third-party patches because it uses the same scanning mechanism as Microsoft updates within ConfigMan. But yeah, so that's pretty much the entire product setup. I'll just kind of cover from a pricing perspective, and then we can go into any other questions that you guys might have. So we have 3 subscription options. We have a basic option. So that one's quite limited, meaning that you have to publish the catalog using System Center Update Publisher or SCUP, and it's not automated. So that's the most basic one. It's using a legacy catalog format that's not compatible with the in-console publishing of SCCM or our publishing service, which is what we've kind of been demoing within this UI. So pretty minimal, the number of customers that go with that, just because of the lack of automation. We then have Enterprise. So that's going to include all the software update publishing within our publishing tool. So basically the updates tab and anything you want to publish that's going to show up into Config Manager as a software update. The Enterprise subscription will get you all the update capability and customization. And then the only difference between Enterprise Plus is that it adds on the application feature where you can create applications that don't yet exist within SCCM and use that within sequences and collection deployments. We do also have a chart. If you click that pop-up, it will go feature by feature, kind of the difference between these as well. So we can see kind of that key one between Enterprise and Enterprise Plus would be that ability to create the apps and update the apps within SCCM. But from that perspective, I think I'm pretty much done. So that's the entire setup. So within about 30 minutes, we can see that we went from having no third-party updates to scanning our environment, enabling updates, creating apps, and getting reporting back. So pretty simple as far as the way that we tried to design our software. So any other questions or anything that we really have at this point, we can take.
I just want to throw out a mad props for making it all the way through a live software demo without anything major going wrong.
Yeah,
you guys have a really great product too, and we'll get there. But that was awesome.
Yeah, I think repetition is helping out with these demos. We do quite a few of these, but yeah, it's usually pretty solid, and I think that really speaks for the way that we try to design this to be simple, right? So, thank you.
Where does patch my PC? So I see you've got the node there under applications, and then what do you have under software updates? You have something there too?
What I have under software updates, this is just the software update group that I clicked. So if you click into an update group, it just kind of expands it.
Okay.
So this isn't something that's.
Do you have anything else that can populate inside in the console in one of the nodes? Like
No.
I think I must have missed that.
Nope, we don't. So that's basically the only thing that we would have is our publishing tool that would be running on your SUP. So this is where you do your product selection. From the ConfigMan console side, there's nothing. It's just all native. You're going to see them in all software updates. You could add criteria if you wanted to filter by vendor. But from the Config Manager UI, it's just all publishing automatically based on our service. So there's nothing special within like a custom extension that you have to install. There's nothing you have to do there. It all just flows in.
And then on that SUP publishing tool, then you could go back to that. Okay, so this is essentially then what's syncing your SUP with the updates that you guys are pulling from your catalog. Right?
Exactly. This is pretty similar. Like we do support like adding our catalog if you wanted to add it natively into the console. So for example, if you did not want to install our publishing tool and you were only interested in publishing software updates, so not the applications, you do have the ability where you could use the native feature directly within SCCM. So we could subscribe to our catalog here. And we are using the new catalog format. So we've been working with the product group since, it's actually been since about 1904 Tech Preview, with a new format that allows some more flexibility with the way that you add a catalog. So the new features that came out in 1910 a couple weeks ago are the abilities where you can subscribe by category. So we basically categorize our catalog, where if you wanted to be more selective about what products you want to publish, when you subscribe to ours in the console, if you chose to go that method, you would have the ability to choose the products that you want, as well as if you want to publish them with full content. So this was one of the improvements that came out in Configuration Manager 1910. So they were shooting for 1906, but there's a bug there that kind of delayed it. But if you wanted to make use of the in-console publishing, which is perfectly fine, we support that. If you're on 1910 or newer, you have the ability to use the new category feature that we can see came out here in 1910. Now, as far as a comparison, about 90% of our customers are actually using our publishing service. The primarily reason for that, the major one there is we do have an FAQ within our site where you can kind of look at the comparison chart that we just popped up. The biggest reason here is that there's a lot more flexibility for customization. So for example, you get a lot more control over those right-click options, as well as the scheduling time that are not natively available in the console. And one of the other things that we actually just changed here was the automation. So before 1910, there was actually not even an automated way for you to publish the updates. It would be a manual process, meaning that it would publish all these updates with metadata, which would mean they have the blue icon and they would show as metadata only. And then you would have to manually come back in after it publishes and choose to publish the content, which would then actually download the content from the vendor and then sign it. With 1910, one of the options within that subscribe UI is the ability to automatically stage content. So even, if it was before 1910 and you compared this chart, these would have been also X'd out. But due to some of the improvements that the product group implemented in 1910, we at least now have better automation if you choose the console. Now, you would not get any of those right-click options like turning off updates. And then kind of the other big thing is that if you do choose Enterprise Plus, meaning that you want the ability to create SCCM apps, that would require the publishing service. That would not support in-console because that's only for software updates. So that's why probably the majority of our customers, they just use our tool, and then they would have they wouldn't have any type of configuration within the console. It would just be our service that's automatically pushing in the updates as well as the applications into SCCM. And then you would just do everything from your console. You wouldn't even really care that our service is running. The only thing that you may take note of are the alerts that you would get whenever anything changes if you enable them. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Any other questions?
How often do you update your offerings as far as what you configure and push down? New applications and new updates, that type of thing?
Yeah.
New vendors?
Yeah, good question. So if we jump back to our roadmap, here it is. So for example, it varies by month. In September, we can see we added about 8 new products. We added 3 or so in the following month, and then 5 last month. So it just depends. If you go to our user voice page, ideas.patchmypc.com, you can filter by app request, and then you can filter by shipped, and you can kind of see some of the statuses that we've been shipping recently, for example. So it's not like a specific number each month. We usually try to at least do a couple each month, just based on what's popular among our customers based on the site. But there's not any like set number, but you can check out the roadmap if you want to see what we have planned, as well as apps that we've shipped in the past.
And do you support all language?
Yeah.
Options?
Yeah. So I don't want to say for every single app, but a lot of the common ones like Firefox, we're starting to add multi-language support. So we can see that we've got some here for Firefox and a few others. So it's something that we actually have a specific category for within our user voice for language support. So this is where we can see customers that are requesting additional languages. And we've also started shipping quite a few different products for different languages as well. That's actually happened within the last month or two, and we're starting to expand that to meet our international customer needs.
Based on the operating system or on the application itself?
It's based on the app itself. Yeah.
So are you pulling telemetry data from clients then, so that you know what products are being used out there in your environment?
No. So we don't currently pull product level selection. It's pretty basic what we have today. So the only real thing that we're pulling today are things like the WCS version, just because that's going to rely on when we deprecate WCS 3.0, for example. There's a few other small things, like if you're using the app feature, that's something we would enable via data. But the products that you enable are not selectable. We're actually very light on what we collect. And no, the products...
That's actually good. That'll mean I can get it past my works council PCs in Germany.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, that's really light on what we collect back. It's mainly just around WCS config, so we can understand what we need to support and when we can stop supporting WCS on server 2008 and before. We're probably going to stop that on January 20th when server 28 goes out of support from Microsoft. We're probably going to stop releasing new product updates for that OS then. And that's one feature that helped us determine how many customers were using that version, for example. So no, we don't do products, just things that we absolutely need to understand how we can develop our product.
Have you had customer feedback on developing your product to actually do OS patching, security patching, instead of using the native tool, SCCM, because it's quite cumbersome at this point?
Well, we support standalone WCS, if that was the question. So we do have a standalone WCS mode where if you're only using WCS, you can essentially make the patches appear directly in your WCS console, and you can install them that method. Was that what you're kind of referring to, or like our own separate tool?
No. So like our company currently actually downloads the metadata off WCS, but packages are created within SCCM to deploy patching via SCCM. However, that process is cumbersome and the packages are quite large. We work with another management tool that has patching capabilities, and their processes are much more streamlined in how they do patching. So I'm just wondering if you had requests from your...
No. So
For native.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, we don't really have any requests. We're pretty heavily reliant and making a better story within SCCM and WSUS, whether it's standalone WSUS or a config-man site. We don't really have any plans, or we haven't really even got a lot of feedback for customers asking us to build our own separate patching tool. So right now, I would say we're focused on integrating with Microsoft technology, and that also includes Intune going forward. We've already got that where we're actively developing it. Hopefully, we won't hit any roadblocks with the Graph API through Microsoft. But no, we don't currently plan to or really get a lot of requests for something standalone.
Can you expand on that integration with Intune?
So we've started coding it. We've got some work that we're developing it. That's probably about the most that I would share at this time. We have marked it as started. The way that I think I'm gonna have to, I don't mind talking conceptually what we're thinking. So there's no native patching available through Windows Update, right? So if you're using Intune, you're just sending your machines out to Windows Update. So I doubt it's going to be any type of like direct patching through Microsoft Updates, just because that would require Microsoft to sign off on a lot of things, right? And they're probably not going to let people create third-party updates directly within Microsoft Update. So what we're thinking we're likely going to do is going to be more on the application piece of things. So for example, the way that we're kind of developing would be like kind of like pre-creating apps and keeping them up to date within the Intune console. So it would help, like if a new update or a new update comes out for Chrome, for example, the idea would be like within our service, you would say, hey, this new app just auto appears. And then you could then use that to deploy the update.
So we're actually a customer and have been for a couple of years. I work for Smart.
Okay, cool.
And I'm actually moving everything to Intune. I probably won't have SCCM at this time next year. And I'd be interested for whatever you're doing there. The only thing I could see of concern is I've noticed my WCS Content folder is ginormous. Like Docker is like half a gig. There's some of those third-party products that are just absurdly large.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's one thing to consider with Intune. Egress bandwidth is going to be an issue.
Yeah. So for the WCS content, we do have a cleanup that you can apply. For any like declined updates, you can run our show unreferenced updates folder. That may help out, like if you've got some stuff left over. But if the update is active and it's just still active, there's not really a whole lot you can do there. It needs to have that content. Now, one thing you can optionally do is you can enable data dedupe on the WCS content drive, because WCS content and the update services packs folder that would exist on your machine, it actually gets stored a couple of different times because it has to code sign things. So if you look at the WCS service packs as well as like the WCS content, there's going to be a variety of implementations of the same file. So if you do data dedupe and enable it, we've seen within our lab, it reduced the size by somewhere around like 60 or 70% within the WCS content drive. So that's potentially something that you may be able to do to help save that content space.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, so I will show like some very internal things. So we, from a code side, like I think we're at a point where we can at least say that we've got some automation working through Graph. Now this is a very, very early preview. This is very internal with some code that we're testing. It has no integration into our service in an automated fashion. It doesn't mean that we may not still hit roadblocks that could potentially cause issues where we couldn't ship this. But we do have some things working through Graph where we've automated the process of creating apps from our product that have been distributed through Intune. So we're seeing some good internal progress. That's why we mark the user voice as started. My goal would hopefully be sometime in Q1, potentially Q2 if we don't hit any roadblockers. But with that said, we're not committing to anything now other than we've started looking at the code. Initially, things are looking pretty good for what we think we're able to automate. So hopefully we'll have a good story about that sometime in the near future.
So now I know to learn how to package Win32F.
Yeah, it takes a little more time. Cool. Any other questions?
Well, it doesn't look like it. No.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for having us as a sponsor. Hopefully the food was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks
Great
so much.
demo.
Yeah, thank you
Yep,
very
yep.
much. It's good.
Who has contact information?
I think we do.
Yeah.
Who in the room is already using Fast Time PC?
This one.
This one?
Will be January 1. But
Two.
So Ryan, if folks want to get in touch, is it with you that they get in touch with?
Yeah, good question. I don't think I did talk about pricing. So if you guys did, want to become a customer, there's a few things that you can do here. You could request a quote. So that's going to be if you wanted to actually get pricing. Just go to the quote request form. Now, if you guys wanted a live demo, like let's say you have more of your team, your management that you want to see a demo, it's basically what we did today. You can come in here, click request live demo. There's going to be an interactive calendar where you can come in and see our availability for live demos. And you can come in here and submit a time for an hour demo. So that would probably be next steps. If you just want to get pricing and you want to buy, you can just submit a quote. And then if you wanted, more of your team to get involved to see basically what we did today, you could also do a live demo and you can request that here.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to jump off.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.